Hello again. We're here for another episode of Today in Space. We're doing two this week. There was just a lot of major things that I wanted to talk about. It was just way too long for one single episode. And I can probably guess you probably need something new to listen to. So we're here. This episode, what I wanted to do was talk about, it's a concept we've talked about a lot. It's the balance, right? It's the balance of, we usually talk about it in the context of NASA and SpaceX, theory and practice, and how, we see it in the space industry where SpaceX is able to move extremely quickly and solve some of these problems that have historically been plagued with time issues, them being delayed and taking too long for them to come to fruition, which then means that NASA needs to go get more funding. And so the original money that was given gets all eaten up. The amount of time they said it was going to be takes longer than they originally want, and then we end up in this scenario where at a certain point, program gets canceled because it costs too much money. That happened with the Constellation program with George W. Bush, where we were going to go back to the moon, but it ended up costing too much money, so they canceled it. Then, luckily we had President Obama and NASA Administrator Bolden. They did a great job of starting the Commercial Crew program, which has had delays and has been pushed off. But this is something that is part of science. This is a part of engineering, and so we have to figure out where the line is between we want to make something perfect, we want to make it the best thing, use the best equipment that we have, top of the line, and do it exactly how we want it to, versus what is good enough. And that's kind of what this episode of The Balance is about, is finding that line of good enough. And I think SpaceX has done a great job of that. I think SpaceX has figured out some kind of magic, as we'll call it, because I don't quite understand it yet. But they've figured out a way to go through the same hoops or the same challenges that NASA and all these other companies that have been working for the space industry, and they're able to do it quickly. And that has happened in an even more accelerated, as crazy as that seems, an even more accelerated pace with the latest with coronavirus and PPE, because as you guys may know, we've talked about it on the podcast before, but with 3D printing, people have been 3D printing. You may have seen the thing about with Italy, where they were 3D printing ventilator pieces that weren't available anymore. They ran out of them, and they need to make ventilators, so they 3D printed, reverse engineered, and 3D printed these pieces to help people that needed it. And so there was a big call out, man, it seems like forever ago at this point, but maybe it was 4 weeks ago, where specifically here in the US and for the Boston area, a call to people with 3D printers to start 3D printing masks, right? And at that time, it was just masks, and this was for healthcare professionals. So we put a tweet out there, got a ton of likes and retweets, and that's great. But the problem is there was no real organized effort. And how could there be, right? Because it just kind of happened. It just kind of plopped into everyone's lap, and it was like, hey, we need to figure out a solution right now. So a bunch of people started 3D printing masks and whatever designs they could find, right? But the problem is who approves that, right? Ultimately, it's the healthcare providers, right? Especially if we're going to donate these to hospitals. They need to tell us which designs are okay. And to the credit of the healthcare professionals, they did reach out to everyone that was being vocal online. They had places where you could sign up. But it was a major issue of, hey, we need to come up with a design that we're okay with, that different parts of the hospitals, whether you're in a surgical ward, they may need a different mask compared to someone who's just on the floor, who's not actually interacting with people that have COVID-19. There was also the issue of, hey, what happens, maybe there's a different thing for someone in a COVID unit. Maybe they need a completely different design. And so that was an amazing experience. I was really glad that I was able to be a part of that. The people in Massachusetts healthcare, I mean, we have some of the best healthcare in the world. So to be a part of those conversations was a huge honor, and I wish all of them luck. But we ran into the same issue. We ran into the same issue of, at what point is this ideal look for perfection. And what is the perfect design? What is the one design to rule them all, right? What is the maybe there isn't just one design. And so, the original plan of, hey, by the end of this weekend, we're going to come up with a design that's okay, didn't quite happen. It actually ended up being another week before we got to the point. And I would say even still, it really comes down to what each hospital is willing to do, because that has been the craziest challenge of this whole thing is, okay, we got the healthcare professionals together, but then there's a whole dynamic that you need to deal with. And before I go any further, me talking about this, I'm not trying to say this in a way that denounces or brings down the healthcare professionals. They're doing the damnedest best job that they can do with the situation they've been given. They were overflooded with situations, with a situation that no one was prepared for, and they're doing the best that they can. And when I bring this up about NASA, I don't do this to bring this up to harp on NASA, because there are people out there that try and make a career about harping on NASA. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is, and that's why I self-deprecate here on the podcast, and I talk about my downsides and the problems I have, is because it's a human problem. It's not a NASA problem. It's not a Medicare problem or a medical healthcare industry problem. It's everywhere, and anywhere that there's science, you're going to see the same issue where and this is not just science, this is everyday life, people that overanalyze. Where is the line where we say it's good enough, and we stop looking for the one perfect solution or the one answer to the problem? Maybe there are multiple. And so at first I was charged up because, look, we have 3D printers here. That's what helps fund the podcast, right? Is our 3D printing lab, AG3D. And so, of course, I was jazzed up to get on board and start helping my community however I could. But what became evident very, very quickly was, number one, getting supplies was a big issue. I mean, again, this feels like forever ago, but this is 3 weeks ago? And 3 weeks ago, I was concerned about 3D printing parts that weren't going to be useful to anybody and wasting material, right? So I put a stop on printing any designs but despite a few, just to test, like making one, just to test fit and stuff like that. But I had to be very careful, because if I just started printing a bunch of stuff and used up all the material, it could be another month before I saw it at my doorstep from Amazon, more filament to use. So that was a very stressful thing to kind of feel like I'm waiting around and not being useful while I'm seeing some other people, print stuff online. But what I did not want to do is I did not want to provide something that made people feel secure when they weren't. So I was on a ton of these phone calls and listened to a whole bunch of different perspectives from different people, because there's also another issue that's going on with PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, face shields, that there's the healthcare side, there's the people in the hospital, the people on the front lines who are the ones in COVID units, in surgical rooms, in hospitals that need this equipment. There's that immediate need, and that's where a lot of these, even from the federal government side, the PPE, the masks, N95 masks that are being given, they're going right to the hospitals first, right? What about people in EMTs? What about the nurses? What about the people in residential homes? People working in special needs? Firemen? Policemen? What do they get? Right? And they're going to get some eventually, but it's going to be the hospitals first that get it, because they're the ones in the front line. So I spend a lot of my extra time. I do have a day job still, so of course I have to put my effort there. Most of my day is there. And then the few hours that I do have, that I'm not spending time with my loved ones, is spent figuring out these problems and printing out face shields at this point. We've got our video on our AG3D YouTube channel. You can see the progress. We're doing it weekly, so you guys can see what we're doing. If you don't follow us daily on our Instagram page, AG3D Printing, you can see what we're doing day to day there. But you can catch up on our weekly It's kind of just like what's the word I'm looking for? It's a mashup of the week, so that you can see that if you don't actually follow us, or you don't have the time to see it. So if you miss something, so we spent the first week and a half doing research, because I wanted to make sure whatever we provided to somebody was actually going to help. And things changed so rapidly. We learned so much more every week. It seems like every day. And it seems like things change. I mean, just from 3 weeks ago, originally we were just talking about masks. Now we're talking about face shields, because although the virus is very, very small, and yes, an N95 mask has the ability to filter out the size of that COVID-19 molecule or disease, the actual particle size. But it's actually, most of the time, you're not just going to have a particle. It's going to be connected to some kind of mucus, or someone sneezing, someone coughing. So having that face shield is super important, because it's probably going to be traveling on some kind of a water-based molecule, right? So if you can catch with a face shield the water particle first, and then have the mask as a backup, you're better off. So, and we've also now learned that they're recommending that everyone has some kind of a mask, and they're recommending even as little as, bandanas, but cotton cloth. So it's really about making sure that the water particle at this point, again, it could change by the time this video comes out, or by next week, but the information was changing. And so I was literally in just a constant state of staying up to date, on calls with doctors and healthcare professionals, of what works best. And looking at the latest research, which again is super, super early. And I mean, as far as science is concerned, this is such an amazing and incredible and terrifying thing. All of those things, all of those emotions at the same time, because even the people who are experts don't know. They don't know, and there hasn't been enough time for anyone to know what's really going on. And the thing that's been going around in my head is, great science takes time to develop. It needs peer review. It needs enough data points, right? And so we're in the middle of this, and so all we can do is good enough at this point. And so where is that line? And so I ask you, where is that line when people's lives are involved? Where is that line when it comes to space travel, when human beings are being launched, when we know that every single life that we lose, we've seen that with the space shuttle. The space shuttle got retired because of that fear of losing of life. Where is that line? And SpaceX rides that line of good enough so well. And I've been looking to them as inspiration of like, all right, at a certain point, I have to say, this design is good, let's print it. So we did that. We found the Prusa mask design, the Prusa face shield design, which is a great design. It's 4 hours to print, gets all the parts, and it actually uses something that is actually still in stock, which is their Avery 3-hole punch clear plastic dividers. So they're a little bit thicker than like the regular flimsy ones that you would like put sheets in. But it works really well. It's something that we can still buy today, or if people want to help donate, they can buy that and help us give supplies to people. Because the other problem, right? Everyone and their grandmother is, in manufacturing, is buying up all of the materials that are being used. So that stockpile of what would usually be a readily available material is gone. And it's, again, not going to see the day of the light of day for anyone outside of the front lines of the healthcare system. So it really is a crazy situation, and not anything that anyone has been accustomed to at all, or that anyone could have prepared for. I mean, I think this goes past most people's worst case scenario of what would happen with supplies and when you could actually get new supplies. So the line of good enough, it really is an interesting topic. And so I ask you for all of this stuff, like at what point is good enough for science? At what point is good enough for the space program, for human lives to be at stake? Obviously you need to be safe, but for NASA, I think, and for the space program for America, the line is not so much human safety. It's we need to develop faster. We can't bank on the fact that in 2 years, in 4 years, we'll still have the same scenario, the same conditions that allow us to get the funding that we need, right? We don't know that the administration or the politicians that are still involved that are helping us get that funding for the space program are still going to be there, or that the public interest is still there. I mean, the big curveball for the space program right now is obviously this pandemic and, of course, funding. So again, we're going to hear the same line we always hear: why are we spending money up there when we need the money down here? And this is definitely one of the best arguments of all time for that. So I think getting more funding for NASA is going to be a big problem. So I've seen this before. I've seen this in articles leading up to this, that they're going to be trying to keep launches on pace because, again, their line for good enough is time, right? It's about time and funding. So what is good enough based on what NASA's learned over years of doing this, and what are they okay with doing? Now, SpaceX is in a great spot that they'll be able to. They've done most of the safety tests they've needed to do. The crew abort test went fine, so they'll be good. And it seems like the test is. Sorry, it's cold. I'm shaking. If you're worried about me, it's okay. It's just cold out here. So SpaceX is okay. We found out that Boeing is actually going to do another test of their spacecraft, Starliner, before setting it back up. Which after their issues on the first test launch, it's good to hear that they're doing another. I think that's great. They have the time, they have the money, right? So that is good. As far as this coronavirus stuff and PPE, we are banking it off of the most available research that is to date. And if people are going to be using face cloths and bandanas, then we can actually provide a product that will do something that a lot of things don't do. What I'm trying to say here, so there's a lot of thoughts going through my head. What I'm trying to say here is we can now provide something that can be reusable, right? So everything on here is going to be something that can be either disinfected or thrown into the washing machine and cleaned, right? So if we throw some heat, we throw soap, and we break down the barrier walls of the cell, then we're able to destroy it. So everything, down to we had a suggestion. Our mask uses right now an elastic band because that's all I had. Now that's not great for people that are allergic to latex, obviously, but what else could be done, right? And an elastic itself is permeable, right? And it's not something you would have to use a new elastic every day, right? So that's not really useful. So one person offered hair ties, the elastic hair ties, that could be thrown into the wash. We also have a fabric elastic that could be used that, again, can be taken off the mask, thrown in the wash, and then the next day that person can put the mask together and work it just fine. As far as the face shield, we're looking to give people multiple sheets of the 3-hole punch binder so that they can clean them, but also have multiples there so that they have some options and some backups just in case they get scratched or it's just they're not comfortable using it again. They'll have a backup, and that supply should hopefully still be in stock. So we're trying to help our local community here in Massachusetts, my neighboring towns. We'll be getting on with our local broadcasting network, which has been great. We've been putting the podcast up there for years now, and it's been great. They've been helping a lot, helping spread the word, so that's amazing. And it's been really cool seeing a lot of people get together to help the people in need. So we're going to be donating these to the people that need them, and it's just, for us, we have had to actually answer the question of when good enough is good enough for science, and it's been an interesting experiment for me to go through, especially with how much I talk about it here on the podcast with NASA and SpaceX. So we actually had a real life example of that situation here. So that's all I want to share, just an update. We're going to be talking with a lot of people. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We are talking with a lot of people that are going to be coming on the podcast soon, people that I've met from over the years, from online, whether they're the Spacepan Squad, our Twitter group on Twitter, where I've been friends with them for a long time. A few of them are going to be getting on. We're going to have a few people that I met during the NASA social for my first rocket launch. And we're going to have them on, and other people through those connections as well. So there's a lot there's a lot we've got coming for you guys. Stick with us, spread the word. If anyone needs a space science podcast or another podcast to listen to, send them our way. Let them know. Subscribe. Follow us, Today in Space Pod, on Instagram and Twitter. AG3D Printing on Instagram, so you can see what we're doing every day with our 3D printers to help with this stuff. And also, we do some fun stuff as well. We've got the Baby Yoda, the child. We've also been 3D printing that and getting them painted, so you can check him out there. Actually, I don't think he has a gender, so I've just been calling him the child. So that's it. I'm rambling at this point. It's cold. I'm going to go inside. But have a good rest of your week. We'll see you next week for another episode of the podcast. And don't forget to check out our Spotify playlist, the Space Mix, that has a whole bunch of songs that have something to do with space or science. You can listen to that. It's a jam. Honestly, we've got a ton of really great songs on there, songs you wouldn't expect. And everything has a reason to be on there. So it's a fun game to wonder, why did this go on there? So put that on, go to Spotify, check that out, and that's it, folks. Spread love, spread science, live long and prosper.